You know, I'm usually pretty good at these things. I probably should have used this last time, but let's do this again. In the beginning, there were two Earths. First, there was Earth 2. Yes, you heard me right, Earth 2. Appearing all the way back in 1938 with Action Comics #1, it was the home of the classic Golden Age iterations of the DC characters. Here resided the original Trinity, Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, as well as other members of comics' first superhero team, like the first Flash, Jay Garrick, Alan Scott Green Lantern, the Spectre, Sandman, and many others. Eventually banding together to form the Justice Society of America in the pages of All-Star Comics #3, while mainline stories occurred on DC's other Earth, Earth 1. This connection would be fully explored and detailed over 20 years later in The Flash issue 123, appropriately titled The Flash of Two Worlds, penciled by DC legend Carmine Infantino and written by JSA creator Gardner Fox. Now, I've always been interested in the dividing line between these two worlds, their start, their end, and their purpose in the wider DC tapestry. Continuity is fluid as of late and can be a hard thing to grasp for any reader. But over the past year, I've been making some progress. After a fair bit of research, the rules become quite clear. All stories take place on either Earth, 1 or 2. If it's an imaginary story or a dream, it's moot. It doesn't matter and it didn't happen. If the story is a repeat, then that means that the original occurred back on Earth 2. This rule is ironclad as long as we don't break our final and most important one. Superboy only existed on Earth 1. This one, Kal-El, as a young man. Not these.
Hi.
Sorry. You still with me? By 1985, continuity had become too much for readers and staff alike, and it was up to everyone at DC to set things right. Headed by Marv Wolfman, setting the continuity became a years-long effort, ultimately resulting in the catastrophic reboot Crisis on Infinite Earths. The multiverse was reset, only this time, there was no Earth 2. The Golden Age heroes, minus the Trinity, all lived and fought on Earth 1 at the time of their creation, serving as an inspiration to the then-modern DC heroes. Then, in 2011, DC decided to streamline their continuity and give readers a new jumping-on point once again with their line-wide relaunch, The New 52. And as a budding young bookworm, I was more than eager to get in on the ground floor, as I had already grown quite fond of these characters through other media. But while I was beginning to read the stories of DC's Prime Earth, unbeknownst to me, a year later in 2012, life would begin to burn elsewhere. My name is Chris L, and join me as we discuss The Other Earth 2. But before we get started, I'm sure there's a different Earth 2 that immediately rushes to mind. That of Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely's 1998 original graphic novel by the same name. Unfortunately, that is not the subject of today's video, but if you'd like to see an excellent dissection of this book, my friend the OmnibusGod has a video on it that actually features a segment from me, so check it out if you're interested. Now, back to the action. If you're a JSA fan, then you were probably happy to see their return to the DC status quo in 2019's Doomsday Clock, written by Geoff Johns and drawn by Gary Frank. This book is a reset for the DC continuity, and during its climax reestablishes the Justice Society and their place in the DC universe. But almost as if it never existed, this book fails to acknowledge another planet within its multiverse at that same time. The aforementioned New 52 was spearheaded by Jim Lee, Dan DiDio, and Geoff Johns, spinning out of the DC event Flashpoint. While the reboot had its intended purpose of boosting sales and attracting new readers, it ultimately didn't have that much staying power. Most of the books were victims of poor editorial management, with some writers hiding their stories, others having conflicting story details, differing characterizations, and haphazard leftovers of the pre-New 52 universe, with the line going back to a more familiar status quo in 2016 with DC Rebirth. Everything was changing on a constant basis. It was like trying to, write in during an earthquake. Many of these books couldn't let go of the past, and in some cases were afraid to let go of that previous continuity. But some made bolder moves than others. Growing up during the New 52, I never really read Earth 2 outside of its first issue, as it was far beyond my understanding as a comic book reader. I was also 12 years old with a $20 limit on my pull list, which I only picked up every month or two. So, suffice to say, Earth 2 would remain unexplored for now. Flash forward 15 years, and with the help of the 7 Seas and the newly released Earth 2, the New 52 Omnibus, I have finally been able to experience the spectacle that was at that time DC's second Earth. Originally published in May of 2012, Earth 2 was helmed by James Robinson, a writer who had previously built a name for himself writing Starman for DC, but was ultimately chosen for their background with these Golden Age characters, working on a slew of different books featuring the Justice Society pre-New 52. While this book reportedly has its origins rooted in the past, with early pitches putting these characters as far back as the 60s, it was DC editorial who decided to give these heroes a fresh start the same way they had for all of their mainline heroes. We decided straight away that we didn't want Gotham City, we didn't want Metropolis, and we wanted to use less common settings. Slowly but surely, we wanted to show that the state of the planet is much worse than the regular planet Earth. I'm actually glad that they chose this approach, as it gives us more opportunities to take these characters in truly new and exciting directions. In the original continuity, Alan Scott is in a train accident and discovers a magic lamp. In issue 3 of Earth 2, we're introduced to Alan and his husband Sam. The accident still happens, taking his future husband in its path of destruction, but Alan is now called upon by the pure essence of the Earth, the Green, to defend it in the wake of the Apocalypse War, becoming Earth 2's Green Lantern. When the glowing aura asks Alan to pick a conduit for him to channel his power, he chooses the ring of his would-be fiancée, whom he was going to propose to as the accident occurred. This was the first time the character of Alan Scott was portrayed as gay, a semi-controversial decision at the time. When asked about it in an interview from 2012, Robinson was quoted as saying, "One of the things about the reboot and having Alan Scott be younger was that we lost Obsidian, his gay son. From there, in the way that one idea can springboard into another, I thought very quickly, well, let's make Alan Scott gay." To DC and Dan DiDio's credit, there wasn't a moment's hesitation. He said it was a great idea. Once he becomes the Earth's Emerald Knight, Alan Scott becomes the heart of a brand new team and, dare I say, this very universe. Inspiring all of these emerging heroes through his actions as well as his words, and finding hope in the darkest of places. Earlier I mentioned how Alan's power comes from this Earth's version of the Green, the same thing that makes Alec Holland's Swamp Thing walk the Earth in mainline continuity. Once the Green awakens, so does its opposite force, the Gray, and with it, its champion Solomon Grundy. A character who in my research I learned was actually Alan's original nemesis during the Golden Age. So, while the Green's burning jade flame represents life, the Gray's desolate pale roots represent death. These roots cover the Earth at a rate so fast that I think our next character is the perfect fit for the job. Football star Jay Garrick is now Jason Garrick, college graduate, slightly dim for his own good, and most importantly, a free spirit, making his introduction into our universe at the tail end of issue 1. He's certainly a departure from the Flash of old. Series artist Nicholas Scott pays close attention to his movements, where he almost feels like Spider-Man to me, leaping his way from enemy to enemy at lightning speed. Back in the 30s, Jay got his powers due to the inhalation of hard water vapors. Hey man, it was the 30s, and we didn't know that getting struck by lightning was a cooler origin, but I'll do you one better. After breaking up with his girlfriend because of his directionless path, he is called upon by the dying god Mercury, who bestows upon him the speed of a god. Pretty cool, right? Jay then becomes this Earth's Flash and is probably one of my favorite members of this ragtag group. He's young and rightfully scared, but when the going gets tough, he's quick to find a solution. And by the end of the first 6 issues, he's the one who suggests forming a team, much to Alan's dismay. What I like about this as opposed to the main Justice League origin is that all of these characters come together because of that common belief in justice. Whereas on Earth 1, when the book ends, it feels like they just form a team because it kind of makes sense. But you're probably wondering to yourself, where are the other classic JSA members, like Sandman, Hawkman, and Atom Smasher? They're all a part of a government-sanctioned superhero team called the Wonders of the World, whose name comes from this Earth's first hero, Wonder Woman. The books don't really focus on these other members, with the notable exception of Kendra Saunders' Hawkgirl, one of our only experienced heroes, who knows the gig due to her time with the Wonders. Kendra fought with the Wonders of the World for a time until she was disillusioned and went MIA, revealing herself to Jay at the end of issue 2. She's an ex-treasure hunter with a knack for curiosity. Her uniform is a far departure from the typical Thanagarian getup, complete with laser crossbow and double-mag Tommy gun. In fact, all of the heroes have a unique and modern look. The Wonders are agents of this universe's One World Army, as a task force of metahumans who are dispatched by their government at a moment's notice, and it's reflected well in their costumes. The Wonders themselves were designed and drawn by Nicholas Scott, an artist who had previously worked on books like Wonder Woman, Birds of Prey, and Superman, with her most recent contribution in Wonder Woman Historia. Her designs are purposeful and realistic, with tactical boots, cargo pants, and night vision goggles galore. My favorite among these, besides Hawkgirl, is probably the Sandman. That's right, Sandmen. Scott also designed Jay Garrick's Flash costume, a no doubt difficult task seeing as all of these heroes have had the same costume since their creation. Jay's suit is sleek and modern, no longer a shirt and pants but a tight red and blue jumpsuit with accoutrements for speed, all tied together with a yellow lightning bolt running up his side. No longer donning a tin hat either, now Jay's helmet covers his whole head with an added chin strap and visor so he doesn't lose it during a fall. Alan's suit, however, was not designed by Nicola Scott. In 2013, she was quoted as saying, "In terms of character design, there were a bunch of us. There were so many characters that were suddenly going to populate this planet that we had several people on it, including Jim Lee and myself." And so, while Scott handled the design for Flash, Hawkgirl, and the rest of Earth 2's Guardians, Jim Lee offered up the design for Earth 2's Trinity, here named the Turnian, as he had for the company's reboot just 2 years before. Alan Scott, however, was designed by DC regular Joe Prado. Prado's design is that of an Emerald Knight, so his costume is skin-tight armor. It's bright and shiny, but also protective, with large gauntlets on his forearms and a chest and shoulder piece with bulk that allows for maximum protection, all reflecting the brilliant glow of his chest emblem. Now, if you've noticed, I have largely avoided talking about the Trinity up until now. Well, that's because there is no Trinity on Earth 2. Because they're dead. In the first arc of Greg Pak and Jai Lee's Batman Superman from 2013, we learned that this world was basically doomed from the start, pitted against each other in a twisted apocalyptic game concocted by Darkseid. Both versions of Superman and Batman face off for the fate of their universes. Earth 1 is deemed ruthless, raw, and dangerous, with Earth 2 sentenced to death by Darkseid, and all parties' memories being wiped. This story is luckily collected in the Omnibus. It's the perfect introduction to these universes, the way they work, their relation to one another, and it gives us the prelude to this universe's cataclysmic battle, the previously mentioned Apocalypse War. No, not that one. Not that one. Though their origins are largely the same, the Trinity ultimately dies fighting Darkseid but succeeds in stopping his invasion. Issue 1 of the Earth 2 series depicts the final battle of this war, with all of the heroes sacrificing themselves to save the planet, and in the wake of their deaths and Steppenwolf's defeat, all of the previously discussed heroes band together to defeat Grundy and prepare for another oncoming invasion even deadlier than Darkseid. Wonder Woman was killed by Steppenwolf, never to be seen again, and her daughter is stolen and raised by him as Fury. Batman dies in an explosion and is survived by his daughter, Helena Wayne, Robin. But for Kal-El, Darkseid has other plans. In the first issue, we see Superman taken into a portal by a swarm of parademons. Issue 14 introduces Steppenwolf's Dogs of War, with Brutal amongst them. His look is reminiscent of the Black Knight, and he can fly and shoot lasers. He promptly knocks out our soon-to-be JSA, splits Steppenwolf in half, and reveals himself to us to be the last son of Krypton, now the minion of Darkseid. This felt like a critique of the Golden Age Superman, and how some, myself included, feel that this version of the character pivoted to becoming a tool of fascism. The One World Army almost imposes its solutions through its wonders. As previously mentioned, government-sanctioned superheroes with their focus solely on the mission. I would argue that some of their means of help border on fascist and don't differ that much from Steppenwolf. And here comes the newly transformed Brutal as a tool for Darkseid's fascistic rule, directly opposing the other fascists at large. And meanwhile, our champions of the people are caught in the crossfire, desperately trying to stop them. Brutal is then revealed to be a clone, siphoning his energy off of the original Superman, showing us that when the Man of Steel is used as a tool of oppression, he only becomes a hollow shell of what he once was. But fear not, because though the world's finest heroes aren't around anymore, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're out of the picture for good. Though Bruce has died, there is another Batman. First appearing in the Earth 2 Annual number 1 from May 2013, this Dark Knight is actually Thomas Wayne, with Annual number 2 of the following year showing us how he came to don the cowl. This is an interesting idea carried over from the Flashpoint universe that not everybody loves, but I personally enjoy. This Batman kills, and he carries a somberness with him that makes his struggle quite compelling, with his story illustrating that the curse of Batman might be inescapable to all the Waynes. He soon joins and aids the heroes in the second attack from Steppenwolf, but just as the team starts to form with characters like Red Tornado, Dr. Fate, and Aquawoman joining the fray, they are met with another strange ally. Val Zod. A Kryptonian who has been held in captivity his whole life, is a little anxious, and the only person who might be able to stand up to Superman. He's just as powerful as those fascist forces. He only needs to find the courage. Something we can all aspire to. As the Dark Age arc begins, introducing us to this new pair, James Robinson makes his swift exit from the series, making way for Tom Taylor, who would go on to finish the saga as the series started to expand and change. A sterling effort, but in my opinion, never catches the same energy as Robinson's initial 15 issues. In a CBR article from 2013, Robinson was quoted as saying, "Issue 13 really is the beginning of all the pieces coming together for a big event at the end of the year. Obviously, everybody can guess that it's when these Earths are finally going to meet for the first time. Those pieces are starting to be laid in my book, and you'll also see things happening in other books. Yes, I have this independence and I'm creating all these characters and creating this world, but I do have to be aware that it is part of the DC universe. Yes, I have freedom, but I do have to be mindful of what's going on in Justice League and various other books." By the time we get to events like Future's End and Convergence, it feels like Earth 2's focus is almost completely missing. With these characters fighting to the bitter end, their planet was finally destroyed in a 26-issue spin-off book published in 2014 after Robinson's departure and aptly titled World's End. Earth 2 Society was released in August 2015, drawn by Jorge Jimenez and written by Daniel H. Wilson, with the team steering the book in a more positive direction after what seemed like a never-ending battle. This book details their journey on a new planet as they try to rebuild what they lost. But following a battle with the Ultra-Humanite, the Earth 2 JSA would basically fall into the pages of obscurity, never to be seen again, except for Val Zod, who reappears from time to time. This Earth was doomed from the start, and whether that be by the forces of Darkseid or DC editorial is still largely up for debate. But the New 52 was ultimately doomed by its unwillingness to let go, with most of its elements being retconned out within 5 years. But Earth 2 was different. In trying to create a new take on these familiar characters, Earth 2 ended up being one of the most original books to come out of this era. But fans ultimately wanted a return to form, with the JSA making their return as previously mentioned in Doomsday Clock. But Earth 2 is still out there, waiting to be explored. And who knows, with the ever-changing world that is the DC universe, they just might come back. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video at all, consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. If you'd like to see more from me, I just put out a video on Superman that you can check out on my channel. I also have a plethora of short-form videos on the channel or my TikTok and Instagram. If you'd like to hear my other in-depth thoughts on comic books or the comic book space and medium in general, I have a podcast that I do with my friends called CrashoutComics that comes out every month or so. As I said before, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one, true believer.